Hello and welcome to Top Tips B2 First for Schools. I'm Stephen John Taylor, presenter for Cambridge Assessment English. Over the next 45 minutes or so we'll be looking closely at the B2 First for Schools exam, and I'll be giving you some really useful tips about what to do and what not to do in the reading, use of English, writing and listening papers. But first, think about this. Do we write in pencil or do we write in pen? Well, it's important you complete the answer sheets for all the papers in pencil, with the exception of one, the writing paper, where blue or black ink is required, so we complete the writing paper only in pen. Now, let's start by looking at the reading and use of English paper. It's worth 40% of your total mark. How long do you think it is? Well, the combined reading and use of English paper is not 90 minutes long. Nor is it 80 minutes. It's 75 minutes, and this includes the time you need to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. You don't get extra time. And as it's the answer sheet that goes to Cambridge for marking, it's vitally important your answers are entered clearly and in time, so practice doing this before you take the exam. Now let's take a brief look at the tasks in reading and use of English. There are 7 parts. Today, from reading, we'll be focusing on part 7. The multiple matching task. And to begin with, from use of English, part 4, the key word formation task. This is a place where silly mistakes often occur, avoidable mistakes. Like this one, perhaps. The truth is, we all make mistakes when we're under stress, but we could easily avoid silly ones like this if we were more familiar with what to do and what not to do. In exams, this information is found in the instructions. Do you read the instructions each time? How carefully do you read them? Let's have a good look at them now. Complete the second sentence so that it has a similar meaning to the first sentence, using the word given. Do not change the word given. You must use between 2 and 5 words, including the word given. Here is an example. Example. Prizes are given out when the school year finishes. Place is the word given. Prize giving, gap, end of each school year. The gap can be filled by the words takes place at the. So you write takes place at the. You write only the missing words, and you write them in capital letters on the separate answer sheet. Now let's look at an example. So what do you think about this answer? Is it okay? It looks right, doesn't it? Are you happy with it? It's an oops. It wasn't in capital letters. What about this one? It's another oops, I'm afraid. We forgot the name. If there's a name in the first sentence, you must put that name in your sentence too. What about this one? It's an oops. It didn't have the word given. If you don't put the word given in the answer, that's a very big mistake. And this one. I cannot say I have seen Dan for over 6 months. It's another oops. How many words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. How many words are we allowed? 2 to 5. And one more. This is a common mistake. It did say in the instructions, write only the missing words. But here we can see a word that wasn't missing has been written in the answer. That's sad because this candidate will lose 1 mark. Be careful not to write any words which are already there. And spelling is also very important. I haven't seen Dan for over 6 months. Haven't? Do we spell it like that? No, we don't. Do you think this candidate would have made that mistake if they had written have not? I don't think they would have done. So my advice to you is write all the words, not the contractions. Don't write haven't, write have not. Don't write can't, write cannot. And cannot, by the way, is 1 word. So let's quickly go back over the instructions. Similar meaning, that means if there is a name, you must have a name. Don't change the word given. Must use between 2 and 5 words. Write only the missing words and write them in capital letters. And if you look at the example, well, that's in capital letters, isn't it? Do be very careful to pay attention to the examples. My top tip for this one is read through these instructions again the day before the exam so you're clear about what to do and what not to do. Moving on now, what about reading? How long have you been studying English? Well, most of you have studied English for between 5 and 8 years. This gives you a great deal of experience of reading, and one of the skills you've developed is being able to tackle unknown words. You can work out the meanings of unknown words from the context or from their structure. But you should also remember that you can ignore unknown words if they're not important to the main message. Don't freak out or stick when you meet an unknown word or two. They're probably not that important anyway. It's also important to recognize paraphrasing or synonyms, as many answers in the reading part are found this way. So let's take a brief look at part 7, the multiple matching task. Here's an indicative example from a part 7. Don't worry, you don't have to read it today. This is just to remind you what the task looks like. And the truth is, you don't need to read through the texts anyway, word for word. What you should do to approach this task is first look carefully at the questions. Then highlight the key words in each of the questions. In this example, one of the 10 questions was, which person says their favourite time was when the band was first together? Can you find the key words in the question? Well, there are 3 of them. The first, which I've highlighted in green, is favourite. The second, in pink, is time. And the third is an idea expressed through 2 words, first together. I've put that in blue. Now, what do? We scan the texts to try and find synonyms. The correct match in this particular task came from text C, Morgan. He said, "Enjoy the days when you're starting out. They're the best." Can you see the matches? Here they are. As you can see, almost magically, paraphrasing gives you the answers. Time, days. Favourite, best. First together, starting out. Now we turn to the writing paper. How long is this? 120, 90 or 80 minutes? Well, it's 80 minutes. And each question carries equal marks. You have 2 questions, so you should practice planning the time you spend on each of them carefully. Today we're going to look at part 1, the essay. You don't have a choice here, you must do part 1. You should know you're being marked in 4 categories: content, communicative achievement, organisation and language. Each of these gets a possible 5 marks. So how much could you get in total for the essay? Well, 4 times 5 is 20, so there's a total possible mark of 20 for each of the writings, 20 for the essay and 20 for something from part 2. But you're doing well if you get 12 or more out of 20, or 24 or more out of 40 when you put the 2 together. That's when you know you're doing well. Content focuses on if you have done what you were asked to do. Let's look at the instructions. The essay will have 2 notes which are clearly linked to the question. Here we have technology and the environment. You must relate both notes to the question and also introduce a 3rd distinct idea of your own, one which is not in the notes. If you look at notes, 3 is a gap and it says your own idea. So you need to add a 3rd idea which is not to do with technology or the environment. If you miss any of those 3 out of your writing, then you will lose marks. So it's vital that you read the instructions, the essay question and notes very carefully in order to understand what you're expected to do. It's also important that you keep on topic and that all your ideas and opinions are relevant to the question. Here, for example, you should not write about technology in general. The question is, teenagers are too young to teach other people about anything. Do you agree? So don't write about technology in general, but how teenagers could teach other people about technology, or how they could use it to teach other people. And don't forget to stick to the word limit. Exceeding it is similar to exceeding the speed limit. The faster you drive, the more you tend to lose control. And it definitely gets riskier the faster you go. It also definitely gets riskier the more you write. Try to stick to 140 to 190 words. If you write a few more, it doesn't matter. You will not be penalised automatically, but try to stick to this particular guideline. After content, we have communicative achievement, which focuses on how appropriate the writing is for the task, and if you have used the appropriate style or tone. We call this register. What we often find is that a piece of writing begins in a suitable register, but then switches, and at some point becomes other registers, and then it's just a mess. You do need to be consistent from beginning to end, all the way through. An essay, by the way, is always written for the teacher, so it should be in a semi-formal register. Semi-formal register. I hear you wonder, what does that mean exactly? Well, it means you should avoid words like these. Don't write kids or like or so. Don't use you. Use we or the passive voice. Don't use contractions. Use the full words. Many people don't understand that really is an informal word. If you want to use something like that in your essay, use genuinely or truly. And phrasal verbs, do not use them at all in your essay. Phrasal verbs, I know that you spend lots of time learning them. They're a very important part of our language, but not in the essay. Now here's part of a letter. But I wonder, is it a formal letter or a friendly one? Look closely and see if you can find evidence to justify your choice. Well, it's informal. We can see this from the way it begins, Dear Steve, from the fact that it has well, and then I've, which is a contraction. So, Dear Steve, well, I've is a very informal beginning. So it's an informal letter. But there are certain things in there that are definitely strange for a friendly letter. What about these words? Belongings, depart, attend to? They're far too formal for a friendly letter. They belong in an essay. What could we replace them with? Well, I've packed my stuff, I've packed my things, I've packed my bags, and I'm just about ready to set off. Remember, we said we can use phrasal verbs in informal letters. Or leave or go. I had this long list of things to do. Okay? These words are far simpler than the words in red, but they are far more suitable for a friendly letter. So be very careful about that. Make sure the language you're using is suitable in tone for the task that you've been set. The letter continues. I think you possess the phone number of my accommodation, really, for the next few weeks, so communicate by telephone. Oh, I don't think we use that, do we? We don't say, oh, don't forget to communicate by telephone to me tonight. No, we're more likely to use, I think you've got the phone number where I'll be staying. Give me a call or call me if there are any problems. So we've looked at content and communicative achievement. Now, organisation focuses on the way you put together the piece of writing. In other words, if it is logical and ordered. The essay has a very clear structure. It should be well organised with an introduction and a conclusion. In between, you should put your opinion on the ideas given, your own idea, and you do this, don't you? The test of a good introduction is whether someone can guess what the essay question is just from reading it. If not, the introduction has failed. Therefore, a good introduction briefly sets out what the topic is. It's often said that young people nowadays would not be able to live without their mobile phones. Don't copy it exactly from the question, try to paraphrase it. And also, it's a good idea to indicate to the examiner in general what your position is. In the introduction, be specific about your topic, but don't go into too much detail. There's no need for examples or definitions in an introduction. And in a conclusion, you should definitely not include new information. It should sum up the essay and confirm your opinion. Now, what are these? Sandwiches. On the left we have a perfectly easy to eat sandwich. It's free from danger, safe to consume. These slices of bread are reasonably thin. The ingredients are layered in order, and attractively so. We are left in no doubt as to what we're going to eat. On the other side, on the right, we have a messy affair. For a start, it's hard to eat, and I very much doubt anyone could eat it without dropping bits all over the floor and on your clothes. Now, these are not, of course, sandwiches. They represent essays. Each layer of ingredient in the easy-to-eat one represents a different aspect of the theme, and no ingredient is repeated elsewhere, so the structure is very clear, it's easy to understand. The hard-to-eat sandwich, on the other hand, repeats ingredients and jumbles them up. In the middle, it seems the writer added a conclusion and then decided to continue by adding more of the same, perhaps because they had some extra time, or perhaps because they mistakenly thought that if they wrote more words, the examiner would give them more marks. That's not the case. Inevitably, they soon discover that they have to add a second conclusion to stop the sandwich coming apart, and so we definitely don't want the second type. Another very important issue is that of linking ideas effectively. Using a variety of linking words is important, such as but, because, finally, etc. It's also important to ensure that the flow of ideas in the writing is logical and easy for the examiner to follow. You can use sophisticated linking words and phrases, for example, moreover, as a result, as well as grammatical devices such as the use of reference pronouns and substitution. To my mind, there are two main disadvantages. The one that may have the greatest impact is, there's a good example, you can use ellipsis as well. Ellipsis is when you don't use words you don't need. The first problem is atmospheric pollution. The second is you don't need to use the word problem again. To link your ideas well, you can contrast a popular view with a specific one. If you're going to contrast, you need to use contrast lexis such as but, while, whereas, although. I'm sure you can all think of many more. But these are not the only tools to help the examiner understand your thoughts. What about punctuation, for example? Punctuation helps making writing easier to follow. Have you ever considered using this thing? You should really, it's not difficult to use. Let's take a look at it in detail. It's called a colon. 2 dots, one above the other. Did you know this can take the place of 7 words? These 7 words. And what I mean by this is. And if you say these words in your mind and the sentence still makes sense, then you've used it correctly. The colon can appear at the start of a list. The attractions of the city are many. And what I mean by this is the cosmopolitan atmosphere, the stimulation of cultural events, or the simple hope of finding work. It can also be used for emphasis. Who's this? Well, it's Leonidas, king of Sparta. When the Persians were landing on the coast of Greece, do you think he would have said to his 300 men, Well guys, to be honest, the only option we have is to fight. Or would he have said, men, there is only one option. And what I mean by this is, to fight. I think he would have used the second one, and you can use it too. You can be very emphatic by using the colon in your essay. Instead of saying, the only effective option would be to ban cars from city centres, you could say, there would appear to be only one effective option. And what I mean by this is, to ban cars from city centres. That's much more emphatic, isn't it? Now, while we're in punctuation, let's have a little look at the comma. Although mistakes with punctuation are not specifically penalised, they can sometimes make your thoughts hard to understand. An error often made by Greek students is the use of the comma to separate a subject from its verb. My class has done a lot of volunteering. Someone once told me that she felt it was natural to do this. Now, I can understand that because many thousands of years ago, some of your wise ancestors used to write down their speeches, and in fact, they invented the comma to indicate a slight pause for effect. But this is wrong in English writing. It will indeed make things difficult to understand, and so you lose marks. So please don't do this in the exam. Don't split your subject from its verb. Don't want a comma in that place. Now the final criterion is language, which focuses on vocabulary and grammar. This includes the range of language as well as how accurate it is. So you need to use a variety of words and grammar. The less repetition, the better. For example, use variety to avoid generalizations. Consider this. Everyone knows how to use a computer these days. Do you think this is reasonable? Does everyone? You can use a variety of vocabulary and grammar here to make an impressive sentence. Look at this one. Most teenagers can probably use a computer these days, at least those in the developed world. Now there's a complex sentence. You can use specificity. In other words, you can specify which people, not just people, teenagers. And you can modify that, not just teenagers, but most teenagers. Then you can use modal verbs. Can. And you can use them in conjunction with adverbs. Can probably. May probably. Might probably. Use, well, might probably doesn't go, but can does go with probably. Might no. Use a computer these days. At least those in the developed world. There you are. There's a very long adverb there. That's what we call an adverbial. At least those in the developed world. Look at that sentence. It's much more logical, isn't it? And reasonable. Plus, it's quite complex in terms of grammatical structure, and that will get you high points. It seems that our friends agree with us. Which brings us to listening. Now, listening is around 40 minutes long, but the important thing to note is that this does include 5 minutes at the end to transfer answers to the answer sheet. So, you can write your answers on the question paper, but don't forget to transfer them to the answer sheet at the end. It's also important to note that you hear each text twice. All Cambridge exams allow you to hear the text twice. The sections I'd like to focus on today are parts 1 and 2. Here's an example of a part 1. In part 1, The best strategy is to underline the key words in the questions. All the possible answers may be mentioned in the recording, but only one will actually answer the question. Listen for the words which mean the same as the key words. These will tell you that the answer is coming next. I'll show you this. Here's a question from a Part 1 task about a man with an interesting job. Together with part of the tape script, of course you don't see this when you're listening. Here, leave is the key word in the question. What made him leave the job? Leave in the question refers to giving up in the text. So when we hear leave expressed as giving up, we know the answer is coming. And the answer in fact does come immediately afterwards. I felt I needed a good regular income. This tells us that the man needed a more secure job, and therefore the answer is B. Another good strategy in Part 1 is to make sure you listen for the right person. All the options may be mentioned, but not necessarily by the person in the question. You may also have to listen for the person's attitude or opinion, which may not be a single word or phrase. Here is a question from a Part 1 task about a trip to the cinema. You hear a man and a woman talking about a film they've just seen. The woman talks about the actors and the length of the film, but the man says that he found the storyline, a synonym for the plot, difficult to follow. So his attitude is one of dislike. Too difficult to follow? That's something he dislikes. What did the man dislike about it? The storyline, because it's a synonym for plot. And who are we talking about? The man, not the woman. Here in Part 2, the focus is on detail, identifying specific information. But did you know that, because it's specific information, it inevitably fits into only 3 grammatical categories? Oh yes. No verbs, no adverbs, no linkers, just nouns, adjectives and numbers. And very occasionally a combination of 2 of them, wherever it's a fixed phrase, for example, top tip. It's important you use the 45 seconds you're given to look at the text before hearing the audio and try to predict the answers, or at least the grammatical form. If you think it's a noun, put an N in the gap on the question sheet. If you think it's an adjective, then put an A, and so on. This will prepare your brain to help you focus when you hear the text. Let's see what kind of words are missing. Duncan uses the word something to describe the puffin's appearance. Describe. What words do we use to describe things with? Adjectives. So it's an adjective. Duncan was surprised to learn a puffins can help it. This must be something, so it's a noun. Duncan explains that puffins create as a place to make their nests. So this word is something which is a place, and therefore it's another noun. Duncan agrees with people who think adult puffins make a noise like that of a, well, it must be a noun, and so on. Okay, as you see from this, it was all nouns apart from the first one. And here's some more wise advice for the listening paper. Never change or rephrase the words you hear. We want exactly the same word or words that you hear on the recording. Never put too much detail. No answer will need more than 3 words, and in many cases you'll only need 1 or 2. So if you find yourself writing 5 words as an answer, something's gone wrong somewhere. And very importantly, never leave an answer blank. That's crazy. You don't lose anything if you put the wrong answer. You only have to gain, and very often our subconscious and our instinct allow us to choose the correct answer. So never leave anything blank. Remember also, the tested items come in the same order as they are heard on the recording. So stop concentrating on a question if you're finding it difficult and move on to the next question. Don't forget, you hear the text twice. And if you still don't get the answer the second time, then guess. Also remember, this is a listening test, so minor spelling errors are not usually penalised. But they will be if they impede communication, so try and spell the words correctly. But if you remember later that you made a little mistake somewhere, if it's the listening test, it probably won't count against you. And so, we come to the end of our Top Tips session today. If you're wondering about speaking, did you know that we have our own dedicated YouTube channel, Cambridge English TV, where you can find actual speaking tests, you can watch people doing real speaking tests, and you can find commentary from the examiners about how they did and what they could have done. All of that information is there on our Cambridge English TV site. Go and have a look at it. There's also a lot more on the site as well. In fact, we also have a special site dedicated to B2 First for schools. Visit it and see what more you can learn to help you get the best grades. And of course, we're on Facebook. You can like our page and find daily learning tips, exam and event updates and free games. And we're also on Instagram, where there's a special app with which you can take a selfie in a Cambridge graduation cap. But you can't do that until you've taken the exam and passed it. But that's something you can do in the future. You can, however, go to Instagram now and see other things that might help you and be fun to do. Cambridge qualifications, by the way, are recognised by over 25,000 organisations worldwide, and they open the door to exciting higher education and employment opportunities. They're accepted and trusted by universities around the world. This is just a tiny selection from over 11,000 higher and further education institutions that accept Cambridge exams. B2 First, C1 Advanced and C2 Proficiency are the exams commonly accepted for this purpose. And here's proof that some of the most well-known universities have included Cambridge English qualifications in their admissions requirements. Cambridge Assessment English exams and tests are also widely accepted and used by companies for recruitment purposes or for training. A large number of candidates use their exams to prove their English ability for employment. They want to get the best jobs with the best companies in the world. We have recognition from some of the biggest brands in the world. In fact, we have over 6,500 corporate recognising organisations globally. And here are some examples of corporate employers in Greece who specifically ask for Cambridge. Our global online recognition database is updated once a month, and it has a list of all recognising organisations that officially recognise Cambridge qualifications. So, did we learn anything useful today? I guess we did. I wish you every success in your B2 First exam and hope to see you going on to take Cambridge C1 Advanced and C2 Proficiency in the future. Good luck with your exams, and thank you for listening to me. It's been a pleasure.